Faith and science are compatible with one another.
Faith and science exist best in a healthy tension.
The American Religious Town Hall meeting is now in session.
Welcome, friends, to the American Religious Town Hall meeting, where the discussion of religious, political, and social issues is meant to promote the cause of religious freedom and to help us better understand each other. And now, here's your host and moderator, Pastor Jerry Lutz.
Thank you, Mark, and I do want to welcome you to another edition of the American Religious Town Hall meeting. We're so very glad you've joined us today. I think I speak for the rest of the panelists. You've only met two of them so far when we say we're glad that you've come today. I'd like for you to meet the panelists. Let's begin with the gentleman to my right. If you'll say who you are and tell us a little bit about what you do, we'll go around the table.
My name is John Peterson. I am a canon in the Episcopal Church, and I am canonically resident in the Diocese of Washington.
My name is Mel Robeck. I'm an ordained minister with the Assemblies of God, and I serve my church at Fuller Theological Seminary as senior professor of church history and ecumenics and a special assistant to the president for ecumenical relations.
Hi, I'm Carl Trovall, Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences at Concordia University in Austin, Texas, a university affiliated with the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod.
I'm Andrea Luxton. I'm the president of Andrews University in Berrien Springs, Michigan, which is affiliated with the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
Hi, I'm Tom Plumley. I'm a minister in the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, and I serve as the senior minister at First Christian Church in Fort Worth, Texas.
Well, thank you. Welcome, everyone, to today's program. Let's get right to our discussion. Back in 2014, Bill Nye and young Earth creationist Ken Ham famously debated the origins of human life to an estimated audience of 3 million people live via video stream on the internet. The debate highlighted what many believe to be an irreparable divide between science and religion. Sociologist Elaine Howard Eklund of Houston is seeking to heal that rift by arguing that religion is not as resistant to science as commonly believed. Her work explores how these two ways of knowing the world, religion and scientific, or religious and scientific, interact with each other, and she seeks to get these communities to communicate better with each other. For example, she has found that believers from more conservative faith traditions like evangelical Christianity or Orthodox Judaism find themselves in conflict with science when it attacks traditional conceptions of who God is or who human beings are, as in the case of genetic reproductive technologies. At the same time, Howard Eklund argues that it is completely wrong when scientists believe that all religious people hate or do not trust science. Esteem for science is actually quite high among people of faith. For example, most religious people are pro-environment, even religiously conservative people, especially when it is expressed in terms of care of creation. On the one hand, Howard Eklund states that when science makes their case in terms of care for human beings, religious believers resonate deeply to scientific claims. On the other hand, when science is politicized, that is, when scientific claims are tightly attached to political ideology, the dialogue between religious believers and science collapses. Today, we are asking our panelists about the relationship of faith communities and the scientific communities, and we want to ask them these three questions. First, what is the appropriate relationship between religious and scientific claims? Next question, what can faith leaders do to help depoliticize science and religion so that more people can benefit from science and faith? And then finally, how can faith leaders address the divisions in their own communities that arise when controversial scientific questions arise? That is our subject today, and those are the questions. Let's go now to those who helped to begin this program. For that, we go to Dr. Trovall.
Well, this is a very interesting subject for me because, as I've introduced myself, I'm Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences. I'm responsible for those who teach theology and also those who teach science. And I do have to say that not all the people on my faculty are in agreement with one another about any number of issues. But one thing I see quite readily is there's a tremendous respect for one another. Our scientists are committed Christians and are people of faith, and understand that there are parts of faith that you can't put under a microscope, if you will, and test. And at the same time, we have theologians who are respectful and listen quite readily to what the scientists say in terms of research and care of the environment and some of these other questions. That said, these really, because God is the origin of everything, ultimately science and faith are not contradictory of one another. The problem is that as long as we live in a world in which we don't know everything, it's sometimes we find that there are apparent contradictions or tensions that exist. But ultimately, these tensions, I think should be recognized, but they ultimately are collapsed. And I really appreciate what Howard Eklund is doing here in trying to help scientists understand that the people of faith are not against them, but because people of faith are deeply concerned about human values, values of the environment, that oftentimes there needs to be a sense of making their argument and their case for scientists in terms of the values that religious people hold.
Okay, thank you. And then also, Dr. Luxton, you helped to start the program today as well. More thoughts on the subject, please.
I remember as a first-year university student in the UK at a public university, we read The Golden Bough, and we were asked to write an essay describing the attack on Christianity there and how much we agreed with it. And with all the clarity of an 18-year-old, I responded. The Golden Bough basically sees a linear progression between magic to religion to science. So science makes religion irrelevant. And of course, I showed all the presuppositions that were completely wrong in the whole book, and in an essay that was 4 times longer than it was supposed to be. And I was rewarded at least with a comment, "Almost thou persuadest me," from the professor. So that was my sense of justice at the time. But that started a lot of thoughts in my mind about how these two worlds, the world of science and the world of religion, connect. And I've gone through many changes in my views in this over a period of time. But it seems to me that both faith and science are both in worlds where there are new discoveries to be made. We never plumb the full depths of who God is. We don't understand all things in faith, but neither does scientists either. We are privileged to have on our campus one of the physicists who was engaged in the LIGO project, the one where the lead researchers won the Nobel Prize for Physics this last year. And amazingly exciting to see as that rolled out what they had discovered that was new and how that changed the paradigm. So science is not all clear-cut. It is not everything is known. God, we can't claim to understand everything. So what do we do with these two worlds when they apparently contradict? I think as individuals of faith, at least to me, we cannot move from a faith position and belief in God and belief in what our understanding of the Bible says. If science contradicts, I think there's an ambiguity that remains in tension there. And I don't think we have to say, well, science is wrong, or be scared of what science is saying. But neither do, and I have many scientists too that are people of faith, and they constantly hold those two things in tension and say, okay, where does that take us? And so I think it's a healthy tension, something we shouldn't be scared of, and I think we will discover more.
All right, thank you. Let's hear from the other panelists now. Let's go to the end of the table here. And Reverend Plumley, welcome back to the program. Your thoughts on faith versus science?
Yeah, I think I'd sum up what Dr. Luxton just said by saying that the real problem is neither God nor science. The real problem is authoritarianism. When one grants to anything or anyone ultimate power to decide everything. That's the definition of authoritarianism. And we religionists might want to say, well, God would be the ultimate authority, but unless God starts writing things across the sky, it's our interpretation of ancient texts and so forth, or of what we see God doing now, that becomes the thing that cannot be the ultimate authority. That's idolatry, by the way, in the religionists' book. So I would say that the problem is authoritarianism, and also the misunderstanding of the nature of, and therefore the misuse of, sacred texts.
Can I just ask him a question?
Yes, please. And you're going to be next anyway with your observations, so go right ahead.
I'd like you to define more carefully or more fully the word authoritarianism and how you're using it here.
I think we run into problems when anyone claims, whether they're in the scientific community or in the religious community, that there is nothing left to learn.
Oh, okay.
That I know it all, or we know it all. That's just wrong in terms of facticity of it, and it's arrogant in terms of the moral stature of it.
All right, thank you. And then continue, please, Canon Peterson.
I found what Elaine Howard said about in relationship to the fact that people in religion do not hate science or fear science. I thought that was a really important statement that she's found out through her research. For me, in relationship to this whole subject, comes a whole narrative of creation. And the issue here for me is how do we understand, how do we interpret the two stories in Genesis in relationship to creation? And it seems to me that those two stories hold the nuggets of theological truth in relationship to who this God is and this creator God. And it's, I think, equally important is that after each single day, the pronouncement is made, and it was good. And it seems to me that the scripture is not attempting to make a scientific statement in relationship to creation, but it is making a theological statement of how we all interrelate in this it is good that has taken place. And so it seems to me that religion and science here can be extremely compatible. Yes, at times to be in tension, but on the whole, certainly people of religion are pro-environment, pro-sanctity of life, pro the wholeness of the earth. And one of the problems that we are facing today, particularly in this country, is that there is an anti-scientific position that is being taken in relationship to environment, in relationship to greenhouse gases, in relationship to storms, the California falling into the sea by mudslides and things of that nature. You know, there's really an anti-scientific stand that is being taken, and I do not think that is at all compatible with the creation stories of Genesis.
And notice you looked at Dr. Robeck when we talked about falling into the sea.
Yeah,
you do
that's
live in
exactly
California,
right.
and so maybe that's why. But Dr. Robeck, your
Yeah.
perspective on this issue, please.
I'm not terribly worried about California falling into the sea. Even with a big earthquake crack east of us, actually the Pacific plate is coming up over the one that's on the continental plate. So I'm not too worried about it. I announced at the beginning of the show that I'm a church historian and an ecumenist. An ecumenist is a person who works with a specific household. The word ecumenist or ecumenism really comes from a Greek word which is oikos, meaning house or household. And oikumene is having to do with those things of the household. And the ecumenical movement is responsible for looking at how churches relate to one another. That's the household of faith. That's one way of cutting it. Second way is to talk about it in terms of all of creation. We were, after all, human before we were Christian. And therefore, we are kin to people who are not Christian. 2/3 of the world, basically, are not in our tradition. But we have a lot in common with one another. Ancestry.com has this ability to trace genetic makeup, and we've been doing it in our family, and it's been a lot of fun, and I do not understand it at all, but it certainly shows that we're tied up with all kinds of traditions everywhere from Cameroon and Senegal to Norway and Britain, and it's everywhere. That's interesting. We're human, and therefore there is this human family. In the 1920s, the old liberal tradition was to call it the fatherhood of God and the brotherhood of man. Now, we wouldn't dare use that language today, but there's a lot there. And then the third thing would be all of the cosmos. I mean, God created the cosmos. This is our home. And therefore, people in the ecumenical movement, not only do they handle ecclesial, intra-Christian issues, they handle in the humankind family, you have issues of interfaith discussions. And in the larger picture of the cosmos, you can talk about environment, you can talk about weather, you can talk about all these things in science that come about. God is the creator of all of it. I have often said, in a sense, God is the creator of science as well. The desire for humankind to find out more about this world that we've been given, the call to stewardship, to do the best thing we can possibly to make sure that world, that cosmos continues to exist into perpetuity, at least as long as the Lord wants it. I think those are really important things. I don't really see the problem between science and Christianity. The one deals with the physical world, the other one deals with metaphysics, which doesn't leave out the physical world. It's when the two cross one another in very negative ways, go too far, making claims, this is the way it is. There is no God. We can't put him in a test tube. We can't evaluate this. Your experience is invalid because we don't have the same experience. All those kinds of things, I think, go too far. So it's really that we have much more in common than we would like to say.
Well, not all scientists are anti-religion.
No.
In fact, I know many who are creationists, as a matter of fact. I have some friends that work at Goddard Space Center. They're near Washington, D.C., who are unabashedly creationist in their point of view. Now, it's not that they are not challenged by their fellow scientists who don't agree, but they do have some interesting discussions in the process, and I'm sure there are many others as well. But with regard to our institutions of higher education, there is also that struggle in science classes to balance faith and religion. Maybe not so much on religious campuses, but certainly in our secular campuses, that's going to come up in the discussions. But we have a couple of representatives from religious campuses and from Andrews University. How is this issue handled? They do consider all different orientations of science, correct?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that's a responsible thing to do as a scientist, to look at that, for students to understand scientific methodology, to understand the claims of science. But I think, at least within our campus, that's very much done within the context of faith in the biblical tradition and the biblical story and the reality of the Bible and the Word of God. So that is done. But I think, to kind of repeat a couple of the things that have been said that ring true to me, the Bible is not there to prove science. Mm-hmm. It is not to prove. Mm-hmm. Neither is science there to prove religion. Right? Mm-hmm. But I also like the statement that Mel made, that God really is the God of science. Mm-hmm. You cannot separate the two. No. Right? And you can't just say that's over here and this is over here and the two won't meet. But in exploring the way that scientific inquiry happens, yes, there will become tensions. But I'd still say that the Word of God still has to remain the part of that informs the tension.
Thank you. Dr. Trovol, on your campus, how is it with science and in the courses and the description of the scientific, how is science and religion balanced there on your campus?
Well, I think one of the things that's important to realize, at least at Concordia, we realize that each discipline has its own methodology. And it's more about methodology than it is about truth per se. It isn't like one, it's trying to keep them, not because it's subjects separate, so they interact and are in tension with one another and inform one another, but not to collapse them together. For instance, in science, one of the methodology is inherently, for lack of a better term, atheistic in this sense, that if you say, well, where does the rain come from? Well, all of us would say, well, God. But you realize that you can't learn anything if you're just going to use God as a shortcut to understand where rain comes from. So there's if you will, a methodological atheism in the scientific method, but that doesn't make science atheistic.
Right. Yes.
Because ultimately all of that is created by God. And it's just a way of finding the deeper way to understand the world around us so that we can behave responsibly.
Thank you. And Reverend Plumley, we just have a few seconds left.
Yeah, a few seconds. I just wanted to look at the statements of two eminent scientists.
Very quickly.
Carl Sagan said science is a profound source of spirituality. Stephen Hawking, however, said religion is based in authority and science is based in observation, so science wins because science works. I think he's wrong because religion is not just based in authority.
Thank you. That's got to be the last word for this segment. We're glad that you've stood by, and we hope this has been interesting, insightful, educational for you. There is an important announcement I'd like for you to hear, so stand by. We'll be back in just a moment.
Thank you, Pastor Lutz. We hope you are enjoying today's program. If you would like to learn more about the American Religious Town Hall, please visit our website at americanreligious.org. That's americanreligious.org. There you can read about the mission and history of the program, learn about the Town Hall estates, and view past programs by clicking the appropriate menu buttons. Each week, Pastor Lutz looks forward to receiving your letters. You may write to him at the address shown on your screen. Send your letters to Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. That's Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. Thank you for writing, and thank you for watching. And now, back to you, Pastor Lutz, and today's closing statements.
Thank you and welcome back. I do look forward to hearing from you. And also, please go to the website, as Mark has suggested, because there you can find some other things about the Town Hall that you might not know about. For example, he mentioned the Town Hall Estates. You might be thinking, what is that? Well, if you go to the website, you'll find a good definition and even a picture or two about the Town Hall Estates and what that is about. I think you'll find that interesting. Now we're going to go to our summations, and for that, let's begin with Canon Peterson. You're first.
Yes, I'd like to pick up on something that Carl spoke about, and that was methodologies. What we've been speaking about around the table today under religion, the methodology of religion is Christianity and maybe Judeo-Christianity. But the world is full of two-thirds, is it, or who are not Christian. And I think that for us to be able to really speak about religion, we have to consider those other two-thirds as well in this type of discussion and their response to this issue.
All right. Thank you very much. And then Dr. Trovol, your summation, please.
Faith and science are compatible with one another. They will remain in tension as long as we remain people who don't know everything. And I think we need to let the methodologies act themselves out, work themselves out in their own areas, and to be in constant dialogue. This is a time when people of faith and people of science have to work together, because we have got some serious things going on in our world that we need to work together on.
Thank you very much. Well said. Next to you is Reverend Plumley, and your summation, please.
Yeah, I guess my shortcut approach to the relationship between science and religion is simply to say that science is about the explanation of how and what and that. And religion is about the explanation of who and why. Religion is about meaning of the that.
All right, thank you. And for your participation today, Reverend Plumley. And now, Dr. Luxton, your summation, please.
I think leading on from what Tom just said, I think this means that science, by its very nature, makes discoveries that allows us to deepen how we respond from a faith perspective. We haven't really got into some of the things we introduced at the beginning, such as our responsibility to environment. There's a whole lot of issues that are raised by science that as Christians we need to say, so what does that mean for the way we live out our Christianity and our faith in our communities? Science doesn't go that far to some degree. I mean, they give the observation, they tell you what's out there, but in some ways our faith, our religion allows us to act on that and do positive things in the worlds in which we live. So from that point of view, I think the two work very, very closely hand in hand and deepen who we are as Christians, people of faith. But that healthy tension still there on the unknowns.
All right, thank you, Dr. Luxton, and now Dr. Robeck.
Yeah, I want to encourage young people in particular to think seriously about careers in science, especially Christian young people. There's certainly nothing to be afraid of there, and if God is in fact tied to science in some way, and I think that God is, then it's really an exploration of the world that God has given to us. And I would strongly encourage you to think seriously of that. I agree with Carl that we need to be in dialogue with scientists all the time in the religious world. It's absolutely essential for science, and it's absolutely essential for us as Christian leaders. I would also say that sometimes I think science goes too far. And I would say this, that when they cross the line from what is possible to what they want to do, which goes beyond the possible, like developing colors in the eyes of designer children and so forth, then I think we've crossed a line that's not a very good one. So we need to be in dialogue and discussion over that.
Well, thank you so much, all of you, for being here, the thoughtfulness that you've put into this discussion and also the insight. I really hope you've enjoyed this, and thank you so much for tuning in today. But for now, the Charter of the American Religious Town Hall provides that Roman Catholics, Protestants, Jews, educators, and others may appear on this program and can declare their beliefs without hesitancy. And the rest of the members of the panel will uphold and guarantee that American right to all who will appear, irrespective of race or creed, so that the rest of the world can see that here in America we believe in civil and religious freedom, not only in theory, but in reality. And again, we're glad that you've tuned in today. We hope to see you again soon. If you have any suggestions regarding what you'd like to see and hear discussed on this program, please write to us. Let us know what you think about these subjects. We'll be very happy to listen to you and to hear you. And so for now, friends, we're glad that you've tuned in. We hope that you'll come back very soon. May the God of all of us bless all of you. The American Religious Town Hall meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.